As we should do.
Did you turn yours on?
Yep.
I think they're automatically.
We turned it off.
Did you come up with any conclusions?
Yeah.
No. Yeah, I know.
Well, you know,
Right.
playing what's gone.
Certain amount, not very good.
Played the ocean yesterday. Took advantage of that third. Gone for 3 days.
Oh, yeah.
It was nice. It's their summertime over there, so very nice.
The new guy has been approved.
Well, I know it'll be a good person. If you pick
It was a hard, everybody's decent.
What's that? If you pick
But, that's cool. Hey, 45 inches. One guy lived in the clean. Who knows that was good or not. That's one.
that was the plan.
I'm not sure where this goes. It's to replace something. Yeah, it goes somewhere. Larry knows. Just didn't notice 12. It must be an old one. I wondered. I kept looking at this. I didn't go on.
No, I didn't.
Too many things.
I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Kiowa Island Planning Commission, February 6, 2019. Oh, I'm sorry. Hello?
Is his mic on? See if his mic is
See if yours is on. Should be over here.
Hello? Better? Oh. Is the other one?
She's checking this out.
Hello?
Maybe people should move up to the front then if they can't hear. Thursday.
Pull it close to it.
I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Keel Island Planning Commission, February 6, 2019. Could you please call the roll?
Mr. Peterson.
Here.
Mr. Dowdy.
Here.
Mr. Belli.
Here.
Mr. Iwan.
Here.
Ms. Messerman.
Here.
Mr. Stinson.
Here.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from our December 5th meeting. Could I have a motion
So moved.
and a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any comments, changes, corrections to the December 5th meeting minutes?
Previously gave clerk a minor spelling correction, but nothing major.
Okay. Any other changes or corrections? Hearing none besides Andy's comments, all those in favor of approving as amended by his...
Aye.
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 Thank you. Next item of agenda is the election of the 2019 Planning Commission officers. Could I have a nomination for chairman
I nominate Fred Peterson to be chairman.
and a second?
Second.
Any other nominations? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I'd like to nominate Britt Stenson as vice chairman for 2019. If I could have a second.
I second it.
Seconded by Gail. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next up, we have our meeting dates for 2019. We did not meet on the 9th of January, but if I could have a motion to approve these dates
So move.
and a second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Question?
Oh, I'm sorry, Andy.
Is there any specific reason July 10th is, well, it's the second Wednesday, but they do have a meeting, town council has a meeting on the 1st of July, unless they change their date.
I think because
July
of
2nd, I'm sorry.
because of the fourth holiday, I think we.
I don't know.
Okay.
July 2nd is a Tuesday, and their meeting should be the 2nd, and ours would be the 3rd.
Evidently, that's not the case.
I don't know.
Because of the July the 4th.
That's why I questioned it.
Second, if you want to have it the day before the 4th of July. I mean,
No,
Isn't the day before where they have the big festival they have, and that gonna be on the 3rd? The partners have their big festival on the 3rd. There's a traffic issue and some other things that happen at the day. I recommend we keep it where it's at on the 10th.
that's fine. I only questioned why it was moved.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Have we approved the dates then? Okay.
I believe so.
Yes.
And the last item, tab 3, are the rules of procedure for our organization. There was one change in section 7, staff, where Charleston County was changed to Town of Keel Island Planning Department staff shall. Other than that, same rules of procedure as we followed previously.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any comments? Andy?
Recognizing that the change is appropriate, given that we now have our own planning department, just recognize that that requires a change in the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan calls for the Charleston County Planning Director to be the planning director for the town of Kiowa.
Okay.
The amended.
Do you think we need to amend that now, or?
No, I think we can do it at the next update.
Okay. Any other comments about the rules of procedure? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. We did new business before old business for good reason, I guess. Old business is our subdivision application, a preliminary subdivision plat. John, if you want to briefly introduce and then segue into the traffic safety and study that we had done.
Thank you. You're reminded that this particular application before you today was on our December 5th Planning Commission agenda. Now specifically for a preliminary subdivision plat requesting approval in the Beach Walker East Parcel 13 area, specifically the Southern Pines Lane right-of-way. And that particular plat is requesting connection to Duneside, removing the currently approved connection to Beach Walker via Cape Point. And so that's the particular same application before you today. I do just want to remind you that in supplement or in addition to this particular application that was received, it was presented a signed MOU agreement that was in your consideration between the developer and Key Island Community Association. And that specific MOU highlighted specific development standards, particularly to Parcel 13, addressing future development patterns, traffic flow considerations for both construction and general service and maintenance requirements, the future proposal of a sort of a Western Beach Club parking, and as well as facilitation of specific dwelling units accessing Southern Pines Lane. Also reminding at that Planning Commission meeting in December, Planning Commission didn't take any formal action, and so staff still recommended that you review the two considerations that were outlined regarding the amendment or review of the access and construction easement approved, and then secondly, looking at the preliminary plat and adding that particular language outlined within the reference MOU on the approved plat if that is the decision. And so I just want to give just a brief walk down since we met in December. Since December date, there are two sort of major developments or key additional items for your consideration on today's decision. And so that first was the traffic study was referenced. The town, since the December 5th meeting, contracted with Kimley Horn to produce independent traffic and safety study. And that was after, at the December 5th meeting, the Planning Commission noted, acknowledged the request and need for that study to be completed. And so since that study has been completed, originally at that December meeting, we remember that we originally, the Planning Commission with the applicant mutually agreed to reconvene on the 24th of January. And since that traffic study came into town's receipt, it was further postponed to agree that we would meet at this date, February 6th, to allow all parties to review that particular materials within the traffic study, those recommendations, that including the Planning Commission, the applicant, and the public to be able to digest those recommendations. And so within that particular study, I won't go into the specifics of that. I will allow Dylan Turner, who is representing Kimley Horn present today, to go deeply into the specifics of the traffic study. But there are two general sort of findings from that study, which were does not appear sort of a capacity concern of making that connection to Duneside and Southern Pines. And then there are pedestrian vehicle and bicycle safety concerns that should be addressed along those particular right-of-ways. The additional development that was shared with you was in a document or exhibit provided by the applicant, which is titled West Beach Community Area-Wide Improvements. And so subsequent to the us diving into the traffic study, the applicant and Planning Commission agreed that this is a good time for you to sort of be abreast of that conversation that's been had with the applicant with some of the community residents, particularly addressing some of those safety concerns, particularly addressing the recommendations that have come out of the safety study, the traffic and safety study. And then finally, is warranted to note that you all have received numerous public letters. Many of you were tagged on those emails, and so just since that December minute, it was upward of 50 letters received by staff that you should have already received. And so at this time, I ask Mr. Dylan Turner to come forward from Kimley Horn, and he'll sort of dive into the traffic study, and you can ask any maybe technical questions or that to Mr. Dylan.
Good afternoon, Planning Commission. Thanks for having me today. So here to talk about our study methodology and what we did for analyzing the connection of Duneside to to Southern Pines Lane. So let's see here. Where's the, let's see. It is on. Here we go. All right, so to go over you first, kind of what our study approach was we met with the town to go over the objectives of what needed to be analyzed and what had been asked of the town to look at between this connection. The second thing we did was we collected data in December, which we understand is the off-season for Kiowa Island. And we did take measures to account for off-season counts to get up to peak season counts. Next, I went into the field and did observations along Duneside Drive, or Duneside Road, excuse me, and looked at different safety concerns, things that were good, things that needed to be improved. And then I went and did analysis using this program called Synchro, which is a standard traffic analysis software, and then looked through our safety manuals and stuff of what we could do for pedestrian, bicycle, and even vehicular safety. I went and made some recommendations, met back with the town to go over the recommendations to get concurrence questions, answer questions, updated the study, and then I did a finalization of the tech memo. Let's see here. Yep. And so this kind of goes over. I know the data collection is going to be a big question here. So we collected counts on Saturday, December 15th, and Tuesday, December 18th, in 2018. And we understand the busy time here is the summer, Memorial Day weekend's the hot spot. So a seasonal factor was developed. And to develop the seasonal factor, we took counts from the main gate, so their counts of in and out, on the December dates, and then dates from Memorial Day weekend in 2018 to get a factor. So what that factor told us was our Saturday counts needed to be grown by a factor of 2.16, which is 116%. So we grew all the traffic counts we had by 116%, and then our weekday counts needed to be grown by 59%. And so that's how we got our off-peak counts to be peak season counts. The next thing we did was we trip-genned all, so trip-gen is a traffic term of predicting how many trips there will be for different types of developments, homes, whatever it is. This case, we took all the existing homes and did a trip-gen. So what that meant was even that existing data we took and grew, we assumed none of that was any of the people living there. It was just some traffic on the road. So to be more conservative, we added the trip gen on top of this to get a base understanding of what the worst case of traffic could be. So we're trying to be as conservative as we can, because when you're mentioning safety, it's a big thing, and we want safety. It was something that we promote. And then we use that as our base level. And then to compare our base level to conditions with the units in parcels 13, we trip gen those and added that onto Duneside Drive and Southern Pines Lane, as well as Cape Point Road. All right, so what we did is, and this came through talking with the town, is we analyzed 3 alternatives. One is just a cul-de-sac at the end of Southern Pines Lane. One was an exit only from Southern Pines Lane onto Cape Point Road. And alternative 3 was an entrance and an exit on Southern Pines Lane via Cape Point Road. So we got our intersection capacity analysis, and this, I understand, is a lot of numbers up here to look and comprehend. But what we found is that the overall delays experienced per vehicle, which is seconds per vehicle, it's our typical traffic way of measures of effectiveness, is that no matter the volume of traffic we were adding, the delay per vehicle at stop signs basically is where these are. So when you're at your stop sign, how long are you sitting there? They're all very good. I mean, these on any type of roadway are acceptable levels of service. And so that's with all of the development traffic, all the conservative ways of how we grew the traffic up with the seasonal factors. The next thing we did was look at, so that's the capacity at the intersection itself, so that's a node. The next we did was a segment level capacity analysis. So we looked at the segment along the roads to see, okay, how does the overall road work versus just a node? Even there with our levels of service capacity analysis, we saw level of service Ds and Cs, which are typically generally accepted as good levels of service, with little changes to the existing or a base condition. So in one case with the two-way volume on Kiowa Beach Drive, it improved from the base, but that's because we diverted traffic away from Kiowa Beach Drive. And then on Beachwalker Drive, it got worse because the traffic we diverted from Kiowa Beach Drive now goes to Beachwalker Drive. So that's what we're showing here in the green and yellow boxes. All right, so now going into the observation. So this is the safety side of what we saw. So from a safety side of pedestrian, bicycle, skateboarding, and vehicular safety, this is kind of the big picture items of what we saw. So the first picture, top left, is what is the existing sidewalk, but it's only 2 feet 8 inches wide. That's very below standard. I wouldn't expect people or bicyclists to feel comfortable using that as sidewalk. And then the second thing I wanted to show is the sidewalk that is out there is a very rough surface, tripping hazards. For bicyclists, there could be problems with that, with hitting a pothole or anything within the sidewalk. Top right, we're focusing in on the top right of the top right picture is this blind curve. So I saw this when I was out in the field. I didn't know that a car was coming around the curve, and I'm in the road taking pictures. And it's because of trees, shrubbery, small bushes, and everything that should be cleared to get a good sight line while you're on Duneside Road. And then just the bottom two are just general cross sections of what the road looks like. One has curb and gutter, one doesn't. And then the last picture just shows the barriers of what's dividing the two roadways today. So what we came up with from a recommendation standpoint is, as far as the 3 alternatives go of however you want to treat the connection of Southern Pines Lane, either cul-de-sac, exit only, entrance, exit, there's no capacity issues that we found in our traffic study. So that decision is on however you want to treat that. There's no recommendation for us because it all works from a capacity standpoint. But from a safety standpoint, want to create a consistent cross section. So if you have curb and gutter on Duneside Road, there should be some curb and gutter on Southern Pines Lane. And then another thing just to help with, and I know there's not a lot of signage out there today, but there should be some more signage, is a speed limit sign of maybe 25 or 15 miles an hour. I know there's not a lot of speed limit signs on the island, but that could help. And then to further discourage, because I know that's one of the things that could be a concern, is cut through traffic with a new opening or new way to get in and out of the island, is to put speed tables up. So these aren't the speed bumps that rough your car up. They're more of a smooth transition over, and it's just to slow traffic down even further. It's another thing we could do is at crossings. So if there's an existing crossing today on Duneside Road, put some signs up there to say pedestrian ahead, or it's a pedestrian sign, or there's a combo ped bike sign to let drivers know, hey, there's something up here I should be looking out for. And we even talked about an additional raised crosswalk. So the bike rack that's, I hope I say this road name right, Diodia? Okay, Diodia Court, is to put another crossing there, because you park your bike and then put another pedestrian crossing with all the markings there. As we said before, is to clear the shrubbery and foliage around the northern section of Duneside Road near Diodia Court to improve the existing sight distance at that blind curve. And then the big thing out of this is to improve the safety for pedestrians, bikes, and even vehicles, skateboarders, is to get the bikes and peds off the roadway. I understand this is a small community feel, and it's a beach feel to it as well, but the best, most safe action is to build a shared use path, so a minimum of 8 feet, And it could be tight out there in areas, and there will be some changes to trees, et cetera, to do this. But that's the best way to go about improving the safety. So from the capacity side, we're okay. From the safety side, we need some improvements to have. I mean, it's an existing issue, but even from a connectivity issue, it can be improved. And that last comment's what I've gone over already, is just to add the additional bike and ped crossing near the bike racks. And so at this point, I'm ready to, oh, sorry, here's a concept. So this is on a GIS, and I understand it's a little bit difficult to see up here for you guys, but it just shows how an exit only would work through what would be the cul-de-sac, and an exit only would be a gated exit only with talks with the town. And then in the top part of this section is the 8-foot shared use path that we're recommending to get pedestrians and bicycles off the road. And then, yeah, at this point, I'll be glad to answer any questions you have or any of the methodology we have.
Questions for Dylan?
I'll start one if you wish. And I guess in terms of recommendations, would you characterize your recommendation for the 8-foot sidewalk to be the most important?
I think they're all important. If we had to
Not all important,
prioritize,
but most important.
yeah, prioritization is to get the pedestrians off the road. So I would categorize that as most important, but that can be an opinionated question.
That's fair enough.
I understand. Thank you.
And if you got the shared path,
Yes,
you think it needs to be 8 feet for shared bikes and,
that's what the minimum is for it to be called a shared use path versus a sidewalk.
Okay.
Sidewalk can be 4 to 5 feet. Shared use path allows bikes and peds to interact hopefully without, running into each other or running that risk. So 8 feet is that minimum required for it to be considered a shared use path.
What's the importance of the changing section and the curb and gutter? I mean, it's a more...
We consider it driver expectancy, but that's on a much larger road than what we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. So in the overall grand scheme of all of this, it's not vital, but it still would be important from just a cross-section water flow type perspective of
I think
maybe
the more modern standard these days is to have a swale section instead of a curb and gutter section.
So, I mean,
not concentrate the water.
I guess the thing is that you've got the curb and gutter on Dudeside Road today, so then either taking that out. One of them is a bigger project to uphold there, but it's for a consistent concept, or cross section, and driver expectancies in there. So that's a little bit of a safety factor, but once again, this is such a short segment of road relatively to other roadway projects.
Right.
It's not vital, but then there's also the visual aspect of it, but that's not a safety or anything.
Right.
That's just visual.
So not in the same league as getting the pedestrians and the bikes
It's not
off
in
the road.
I would not consider it in the same league.
why do you, what's the logic behind having that path all the way from Kiowa Beach Drive all the way down Southern Lanes?
The logic of having it the whole way.
Right.
It's to get pedestrians out of the road. That's the whole logic of
And
it.
when you
is-
observed, there were people who would start there and
So whenever I was out there, it was December, and we have to consider the Timbers is still under construction, and you've got parcel 13 that's under construction. So with 13 being under construction, I would imagine there would be people crossing Southern Pines Lane to get to the beach. So whenever I was out there, I observed 2 people walking their dog in the road, and that's the only observation I made. And I understand in the summer, it's going to be much more active out there. But the whole goal is to provide a path for people to not be forced to use the road. And I would say what's out there today is substandard and would be difficult to use.
That's what I was going to ask you. The current condition with minimal sidewalks really needs to have a bike path. I mean, to keep people off the roadway now
Yeah,
with the traffic that exists.
yeah.
and it
I-
would be only
it could-
worse.
It could happen now even without this connection, so.
Did you happen to notice by any chance if it was more than your first trip on the island, you probably didn't get lost, but if you took a left as you approached this new semicircle or whatever we have at the end of Kiwa Beach Road, took a left and went down to the Sandcastle?
Yes, right
Did you
there
notice-
off of, why am I blanking on the name? Cape
Kiwa
Point
Beach Road,
off-
when it comes in.
Yeah. Wait, are you talking about where the cul-de-sac is? Or are you talking about at Shipwatch where they've redirected all the traffic? You've got all the construction where the new resort's going.
Past that, you go right down to the Sandcastle area.
Okay, so
But
where
it's
they're
a
building,
similar-
where they're building the roundabout.
The point was, it's a similar road, similar width. We do have a goal in our comprehensive plan to promote compatibility among roadway improvements. Now, if we went ahead and did something here, or the developers did something here, would that also, in your mind, suggest that we should do it elsewhere?
As far as
Compatibility?
the path goes, I mean, as we're talking about from the road cross section, as far as the road itself, having curb and gutter or not, in this area is not vital, but I would say having a consistent path for people to use, there's great paths out there today. But having a good consistent path around and having that connectivity would be important.
I just have one other question on your extrapolation for volume and future traffic. With respect to 13A, what assumption did you make in terms of the number of units or number of homes?
Okay, we did, I'll pull it up here, it's in the trip generation, but it's 141 townhomes is how we trip gened it. So we assumed that it was like a townhome in nature versus a single family. And what that told us is that there'd be about 50 new trips in the AM peak hour and 62, so this, when I say AM peak hour, that's on a typical weekday. So that's Tuesday through Thursday, or what we, in the traffic world, consider a typical weekday. So about 50 in the AM peak hour, about 60 in the PM, and then it says 66 Saturdays, so we could round that up to about maybe 70 or so on the Saturday peak of vehicle trips going back and forth.
And would that number include, or those numbers include construction traffic?
That does not include construction traffic, that includes final traffic. That's the development being built. So that's not construction traffic included in those numbers.
You mentioned in your report the speed tables.
Yes.
Could you get a little more information on that?
Okay, so I wish I had a diagram for you. I can send one to Stephanie so she can send it to you all as well. But you know, if you hit a speed bump, it's a narrow bump in the road and it's pretty sharp. So what the speed table is a way to accommodate, it was a way of engineering accommodations for ambulance and fire trucks so that they're not jarred when they're, you know, it's an emergency going on. So it's more of a flat rise and then a flat table and then a flat, or a steeper slope. So I'm not saying that right. Steep slope up, flat on the top, steep slope on the bottom. So it's more of like a smoother ride over the speed table. It's not as sharp and jarring as a speed bump would be.
And if you did those at the crossings, you'd make the top wide enough
You can
to
make the
accommodate
top
the
white
8-foot
and
path?
you could put the markings for the pedestrian and bike path on top of that. That's
And can they be done to not impede drainage? You can certainly.
That's the big thing. You do not want it near a drain, and that would need to be analyzed for more that we have. So we have GIS. We'll need actual survey to
Sure.
get where the best placement of these is, and they can't be in curves. And it is a curvy road, so there's only a limited number of places that a speed table could go. But drainage is definitely a big thing to look at when you're doing speed tables.
But as long as it's taken into consideration, they can be done without messing up the drainage.
Yes,
Okay.
and I know there's some drainage issues on Dune side. I went out there after a rain event, and I guess the side near Teodia Court, I'm gonna get this right. There was some flooding going on there. So
In the areas where there is a problem with coordinating with drainage, you could also use, excuse me, speed bumps, couldn't you?
well,
You have
I mean, the speed bump is a drainage device, I don't know, you can put drains at the end of them to help, but you would have to tie that into an existing
So-
system. So it could, yes, it could be a way. It would take some engineering to get it to there. It's not like plop it down and there it is. It takes some.
I just wondered which way is the most effective to deter speeding? It seems, I mean.
Right, so the one good thing that's out there today is naturally dune side's a little curvy, so that should deter speeding, should. But this could be a supplement to that. Speed tables are a good way to deter it.
I just know the difference between speed tables and the speed bumps.
Right, and I can send an image so you guys have that. I maybe could pull it up on the phone too. So, but yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions of Dylan? Any other questions?
No.
All right.
Thanks
Thank you
very
for your
much,
time. Yeah, I
Dylan.
appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Does the applicant have any comments on the traffic study that they'd like to share?
Okay.
I mean, what would you like to do next? I think we should hear from the applicant now.
We're prepared to do that.
Okay, great.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Mark Permar, and along with Ray Pantlake and Jordan Phillips, we're here to provide some backdrop and hopefully answer any questions dealing with the applicant for the plat. There is very little I could add to the core elements of the plat because it's been before you quite a while now. But what we would like to share with you is an aspect of some work that has been accomplished since we last met about 2 months ago with a working group of some representatives of the property owners in that area. So with your permission, I brought a brief slideshow, and Ray, I forgot to hand them out on my seat there. There's some handouts for people. There are 3 sheets of select slides in here if you would like to take a look at that, but I'll refer to those in the presentation. So the focus of our brief presentation today is to add to the information that you already have, not only the commissioners, but people in the audience, of the work that we're considering. The first thing I'd like to point out very briefly, a couple of slides that just give context, is the proposed future activity of residential and some amenities. I'll wait. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I brought 30, so some of you might have to share. The first slide gives us context from a big picture standpoint in which this parcel, which is at the extreme western end of Kiowa on this conceptual master plan, has always been envisioned as part of the core area of West Beach Village, even going back into the 1975 approved planned development district when we were then part of Charleston County. This slide, again, points out the specific location at the western perimeter of West Beach. West Beach is this zone in here in terms of the core part. Obviously, West Beach, as we all know it, goes all in this particular area, but the concentrated part of having a resort in a very specific area, all within a walk distance, was one of the key differentiators of the original plan. That is, instead of scattering resort facilities everywhere in all locations, which was the pattern of the world at that time, Kiowa did it slightly different, which is to concentrate those in very specific areas. This slide captures the basic entitlements which are outlined in the development agreement between Kiowa Partners and the town of Kiowa Island. All of you, again, are very familiar with the basics here, but it outlines very specific limits as to height, floor counts, open space requirements, density limitations, and in the context of what we're talking about here, this one key element of 235 development units on the entirety of parcel 13. To give you some context, Timbers Resort in that position is on about 3.5 acres, if I'm not mistaken, Ray, about 3.5 acres, which technically could have allowed for 36, 38 dwelling units, but similar to all development on Kiowa to date, they chose a pattern similar to what we have chosen over the decades of having less density. So they have 21 units within that area. This slide is important because we've been asked a question multiple times, which is a good core question, which is, why did you choose one way of access 2 or 3 years ago, and why are you choosing a different way of access now? What I'd like to share, and this is hopefully the common answer that we've given to this, is back then we had very little understanding and commitment of what was going to happen in the core of West Beach. That this aerial that was taken in 2015 was the void area of the original inn in the straw market. And there had not been announced plans yet. Now, obviously, there was a lot of work done by the resort at that time in terms of determining a concept, a vision, but that was not public yet. They did not announce to the world what was going to work in that area, or what was going to happen in there, much less when it was going to happen. Fortunately, now it's happening. And fortunately, now we have a major tournament coming up that will prompt them to finish in that time frame. The other activity, which I'm embarrassed to admit, and I admitted the last meeting, is we did not have a good understanding of the traffic impacts associated with the public beach access area. So this image taken in a pretty typical summer day out of the front of my windshield was fairly typical of the activity of backup traffic in this location. So a choice that we made earlier of only having access on Beachwalker Drive seemed to make sense to us at that time because we were uncertain what was going to happen in the core of the village, and we had no really good understanding of the traffic impacts. Over time now, on this next slide in West Beach, this is the conceptual master plan for the core of West Beach Village, and that's well underway. The first part of that is obviously the clubhouse, and well under construction, the Villa Rental and the conference center, and you're seeing the site work for the hotel coming forward with hopefully a grand opening before the May date of the PGA Championship in 21. And the PRC is doing some improvements in that location, but because of this greater clarity, we made a choice of having a plat that is represented here with this color enhancement of developing parcel 13 with it being dominated by access from inside the existing gate. We were asked in the middle of this process to take a pause, 20-second timeout, and connect with the community association to see if we could evolve an understanding, which eventually evolved into a memorandum of understanding and agreement between both parties of addressing concerns raised by many of you and your neighbors. That is, the increased traffic associated with any sort of development at any level in this location has an impact, as is evidenced by the traffic and safety assessment. We took the time at that point last year to pause in the plat process, meet with the community association, and out of that came that memorandum of understanding. And in that handout, in this position, there are a couple of key items that also John referred to, which are part of the proposed condition of a plat in this location. And the key ones are this, that within this green area, there shall be no more than 120 residential units in the future, and the 21 residential existing units in timber. That is not 234 total, but a total of 141 that can only access from inside of a Duneside Road extension. But there are also additional sort of conditions, which is, for example, the construction activity. I think there was a reference earlier today about construction activity. All construction activity has to be accessed off of Beachwalker Drive. It can't go through the main gate, through the village, and enter in this location. It has to be from Beachwalker Drive. There's a condition of because we're integrating a beach club in this location too, there's a condition that the only vehicular activity associated with that beach club is only limited to 30 member spaces. And a beach club in this location would have far more spaces, but not only that, but all employees, service deliveries, special event setups, all sorts of activity associated with the normal operation of a beach club has to come off of Beachwalker Drive. It cannot come through Duneside Extension. Although not listed here, and I don't believe it's part of the condition, but there's a commitment by the property owner, the applicant, to share up to $100,000 that would be contributed toward efforts to address what I'm about to share with you, some proposed improvements for the safety area of pedestrians and the biking and that sort of pattern in that area. This is an agreement by both parties that is not only honored just because of a plat, but independent of the plat. The final item is there is a provision in there that should sometime in the future there would be a desire by whomever to connect these two roads with, for example, the egress-only alternative or some other form of connection. The only way that can happen is if both parties, the community association and the applicant, agree to that. The applicant just can't raise their hand and say, okay, I'm ready to connect. No, that has to be approved by the community association under those considerations. Let me go to a key element of a group of people that have been, this is an informal group. And I am not here, just so you know, I'm not here representing that there is total agreement by this working body. But I do want to share that this is a group of people that are trying to figure out how to best address many of the questions that were raised in the traffic and safety study, which is how can we not only improve road safety, but more importantly, pedestrian safety in this area. So this drawing, which you do have, represents, this is a worksheet here, so bear with me. This isn't a formal presentation as such as a worksheet. It has an array of numbers here and then call-outs down this list that list specific points of consideration that the property owners and we have either observed or think is important to address or yet to be refined. This is the type of thing that has yet to be refined. So let me give you a good example. In the Kimley-Horn report, they outlined it would be really good to have a leisure trail from Kiowa Beach Drive way up in here, running parallel and within the right-of-way at Duneside, all the way down here, and then the future connection, and have it in that location. We all know that there's an existing segment of the path there. But even if we were to increase the width of it beyond the photographs that were shown from 2.5, 3 feet at most, 4 feet to 8 feet, even if we did that, this is really tight, really, quite frankly, unsafe for people getting in and out of the pool area and coming close to that corner in that location. So our working group proposed an idea of let's eliminate that segment, reposition it such that when people come here and they want to go to the beach, they enter the Kika trail system right in here. And then there's a new trail segment to the west on parcel 13 that parallels the boundary line with the pool location and then connects with a location where you'd have one of the raised panels that the gentleman was speaking about in that location so that you had a safe transition for people going to and from the beach. Then we added the potential for another gate access to the pool here, which would be controlled by property owners in that area. Remove the access point here and put it on the north side of the pool. My only point is these are examples of sort of work in progress to consider the best way to handle it. It's not to take away from the intent and the goal of the Kimley-Horn report, but it's sort of particularizing it and adapting it to a very specific location. We support the idea, for example, of selective pruning, clearing of trees in that corner, regardless of the trail position over here. And we even suggested to the cottage owners, so that might be a nice location that was still fenced in, where there might be a modest little playground or something for the extension of families in that activity. It's just an idea, though. So these are the types of things that we're recommending. The other, we recommend that in that location above, where for the Inlet Cove people, for example, when they go to the beach, they go like this and this. Now they would go like this, back and forth. But ultimately, when West Beach is restored as a place of energy, all of us in this area are going to want to go to West Beach. And we're encouraging talks with the community association to strengthen the trail system along the north side of Sparrow Pond, the real pond, not the cottages, but the real pond in that location, because that's going to be a great way to connect to West Beach. So I use these as examples of a work in progress, not fully agreed to yet, because we would naturally refine the plan, develop budgets, who pays for what, when is it coordinated. Another example would be down here between Duneside and Timbers. There's an existing beach access easement in that location. We heard loud and clear, it would be good to, let's go ahead and finish that now in advance of any future development. So the company, independent of the $100,000, the company is already committed to finishing off that beach access way as promptly this year as possible. Let it mature, and then as people develop new muscle memories, that it's another alternative going forward. The last two slides are simply looking at the larger area of context of where trails may or may not occur. This is the last slide. Here's my contribution to the raised panel. I don't know if it's what you would have, but
Yeah.
this is the example. So that's the existing condition right now for people going to the beach right through Duneside Villas, right there. That's what it is. This is an example of the raised panel that you were discussing, which is make it the same width as the trail, make it 8 feet in width on the flat, and then you taper off on both sides so that when someone's approaching it in a car, it's a clear crossing. And we're even recommending that you put a stop sign there. That don't let the muscle memory roll through, but we put stop signs in those locations too. The Kimley Horn report suggested this trail all along in here. There are members of the community that probably ought to voice their opinion, but they're concerned about the placement of that trail, and we think there's a way to go through this zone where there are existing trail connections that would still allow people to get to where they are getting. But I've gone beyond my duty here of time allotment, so I apologize for that. The thing I would like to end with is we believe, first and foremost, that the plat meets the technical requirements as published by the town. We believe it meets the goals and intent and specifics of the development agreement, which by proxy also aligns with the comp plan and all other regulations. You can't have a development agreement that is not in line with all of that. So we believe at that sort of big level, we're consistent with that. We think the time that we have spent postponing and deferring has been beneficial, and we're committed to going forward with working with the community and the community association on these improvements. But we're saying now is the time to approve the plat. That's our sort of message today. So Ray and I are ready to answer any questions that you might have.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Either way.
Well, just on, I know it's a concept, but one of your call-outs was about relocating the bicycle rack. And are you envisioning that going up at the north entrance as well then? I mean, right now, that bicycle rack seems like a very dangerous situation.
Very good point. In this section of Duneside Road, right-of-way, there are two conditions. There's bike parking along here, and there is perpendicular parking for vehicles there. The bike parking, we believe, should be part of this system right here, and we're suggesting a location which is much safer for families. And it can be phased. So for example, we could put the number of bike parking spaces that the community thinks is appropriate, and then there's still room to add increments over time.
Get them off where they're not backing up onto the street.
Right, right now, people in the audience really should speak to it, but right now, it doesn't take much to pull a bike out, and it's been a while since I've had a toddler, but it's not a good condition. So we think there's a really logical, safe way that you can integrate it within this setback. This is the setback. This is a contribution of access by the partners, of access to the zone to accommodate that. The other point that your question prompted me to address is this beach parking in here, even today, is not a really good situation because big SUVs, their tails sort of hang out into the road right of way. And again, it just can be an unintended consequence of the situation. So we need to address that with the community association of how to best, as a minimum, we think they should be removed. There should be a different way of addressing it. So,
Mark, this conceptual proposed trail system, alternate trail system, is it a shared path system as the consultant was recommending?
there are certain sections, let's take Greens Lake. When you go from Greens Lake, the shortest distance to the pool, there is, at the end of the cul-de-sac here, there's a really tight trail through there, and then there's a rise. I mean, there's a dune, there's a huge dune that goes through there, and then it snuggles its way through two cottages and then connects in there. We think sometimes you're going to have to figure out a way that it's not 8 feet. There's just not room to do 8 feet. So you increase the safety of what room you do have available, and wherever possible, like the new addition to the west of the pool, that's clearly an 8-foot lane. The path that is existing right here that Inlet Cove uses quite a bit, or people in this area that want to go to Freshfields, this is the way to bike to Freshfields. That should be improved to 8 feet. So my answer is it needs to be customized to the condition with the goal of 8 feet is the standard unless there's a compelling reason that you just can't accommodate it.
Have you got a cost estimates as to what?
No, clearly that's the next step. I mean, this is, you know, some trails are about improving existing conditions. That would be one factor. The others are new trails. That would be a separate factor. So what I'm representing today is a work in progress. We're committed to this going forward, and then as a part of that, we would develop budgets and schedules.
Okay, right now you're only committed to $100,000.
No, KOCA is.
Right.
No, they're committed to $100,000.
Well, up to $100,000,
Understand.
or it's matching. And then also, I want to point out that beach access there is not part of, that's separate. That's a commitment, separate and distinct.
But my point is, I mean, I know this is still conceptual. My point is that what's the assurance to us that if by putting this bike path in and doing all these things, if it runs, that KICA will fund whatever is above the total $200,000?
I can't represent.
So we don't know that?
Yeah, I can't represent that assurance. All I can represent is the agreement and the intent and what we're trying to accomplish. So I do not want to misrepresent that. Is that fair? All right.
Mark, just going back to what was on your last, I guess this is the left side. That dotted line, broken line down the bottom, is that the path you're saying comes in from Inlet Cove?
I'm sorry.
This bottom line here?
This one?
No, further to the left. All the way at the end, this side.
Here, why don't I do?
Way down at the bottom there.
Oh, this one right here?
Beach
Yeah.
walk.
That's the public's beach access to the beach. That's their path. That's being relocated further west as a part of their improvements. They're improving the showers and the locker rooms and boardwalk, and there are a whole range of things they're improving in that area. As part of that, that is being relocated slightly further west and aligned with, if you know where the emergency vehicular access point is.
Yes.
It's aligned with that so that it is possible to get emergency vehicles closer to where the people go in and out. That was the intent.
The question really was the access to the trail from Inlet Cove. You said they come across Dune?
Yeah, here, right here, Inlet Cove people come along this existing trail. They cross right there, and then they go, if they're going to the beach, they go like that.
So you're gonna have, your proposal then would be to have an 8-foot access path coming through?
Right there.
Right there.
Off
Yeah.
Beach Walker, off Southern Pines.
So that connection, Inlet Cove people come here, and right now they do this. What we're proposing is there's a new trail right there that's 8 feet. That's how you get to the beach if you're from Inlet Cove. And the reason for it is we're trying to get them off the road, right along the road edge.
Yeah, but this, you don't show, Beach Walker's way up here, or 8, isn't it?
Beach Walker,
Yeah.
on this drawing, Beach Walker is way over here.
Okay. And where,
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Beach Walker Drive, the road is
Right.
that road right there.
right. And they're
Beach
gonna
Walker
walk
Park
across-
is over here.
They're gonna walk across there from Inlet Cove.
Right,
and come
right there.
over in through an 8-foot wide access
Right,
where you can drive a car. And they're gonna come in and then access the trail somewhere on the other side of,
Right.
Dune side.
well, right now, this is the existing survey and conditions. Right now, they go on that trail, and then they go to the beach right there. And what we're proposing is a more direct route there, along there, and then to the beach. But if Inlet Cove wanted to go to the New West Beach, a restaurant, or play golf, or whatever, and they wanted to walk over, they would go like this. They would go right through there, and then there's a trail. There's an existing trail along Sparrow Pond, the actual pond.
Now, there's still a proposal, I understand, for additional parking for the beach club?
Yes.
Somewhere in this site?
Yes. The original proposal was for 50 spaces. When we had the conversation and discussion and go through the formulation of the memorandum of understanding, that was reduced to no more than 30 spaces. And let me just go ahead and answer the question, which might be out there for everyone. Why 30 members? Why? Well, we're starting to, with the rebirth of West Beach Village as a core, we're starting to see slight evidence of people buying in the West Beach area that are either existing club members or have an interest in the club that are close to this. They aren't down island or mid island or the north side of West Beach. They're close to this. So the idea was to accommodate those few people that would have access to the beach club. All other beach club parking needs, whatever they might be, would be outside this area, not accessed by Duneside Road.
So there will be additional parking for the beach club that would enter through.
That's correct.
Yeah.
But as I said, all other activities associated with the operation of the beach club, outside. That's not Duneside Road, outside.
And there's no connection in those
No
two
connection.
areas?
No, for example, let's say there's a master plan in this area of various building types with their parking areas and everything, and there's a circuitous route that you could, no, you cannot, that's part of the MOU. You cannot have any evidence of vehicular connection, either direct or indirect, through any means, like, but where you have parking areas and sort of shortcuts and that sort, no, you cannot have that. You cannot connect the two going forward.
So far, it seems based on the, let me call them tentative agreements or tentative agreement points, that the biggest assumption is that there's going to be bicycle traffic, maybe golf cart traffic, but limited vehicular traffic coming down Duneside to get to the pool?
To the-
Basically for Sparrow Pond and Duneside folks,
To,
basically use
yeah,
walk or use,
well, yes.
Yeah.
So for those owners and their guests that have access to that existing pool, I mean, there is no parking associated with that pool. So they would walk and bike,
they use it.
they walk and bike to it. I mean, this pool is an anomaly. My wife, who was involved in the very first team at Kiowa, I asked her, well, why is this pool there? Because if you notice in West Beach, there are no pools for Fairway Oaks and there are no pools. Well, this pool in Sparrow Pond was the very first offering by the company at that time. Before the resort inn was built, it was under construction. That pool was under construction. They were not allowed to open that pool to Sparrow Pond property owners. So the company at that time built that pool in advance of completion of the core resort at that time. That's why it's an anomaly. It was timed to provide suitable access to a pool for the early buyers at Sparrow Pond.
But the sense is that there'll be less vehicular traffic than there is now, or would you say the vehicular traffic that we see now will continue at about the same pace?
Well, no, there would be increased vehicular traffic associated
No,
with
I mean just to the pool area.
You should ask the property owners. I would assume the patterns would be the same. That is, the pattern.
There'd be as much traffic now as there was before.
I would assume people and their guests and their families would conduct movement the same way.
And you're confident that both trails or paths, whatever you want to call them, whether they're 8 feet or 3 feet, will satisfy the needs and keep people off the street?
I think we should achieve to the highest standard for the trails. And that is a combination of dimension as well as where the trails are located. And I'm speaking for myself now. I see locations, very subtle locations where you add some connector for the people in a very specific part of Sparrow Pond or whatever, where you just add a modest little segment to an existing trail would actually formalize what people probably do right now. If I had to guess, there are people that cross over property lines and, that like neighborhoods are, right? I mean.
Well, and that really goes back to the point. The point is there are trails there now.
Right.
But yet there's still a lot of vehicular traffic on Duneside.
Right.
For the pool area.
Right.
And you don't expect that to change.
To serve Duneside and the cottages at the lower,
So you're gonna see a lot of pedestrian traffic on the road as it is today.
I would assume that there's pressure with muscle memory and people that are familiar with that area to still walk on the roads. What we're suggesting in our best efforts together is if we make it easier and safer for people to connect to locations, we increase the chance of people being off the roads. Number one. Number two, where there are crossings where the trails are, which are not marked, there's no evidence of safety. We're calling those out with the raised panels and the stop signs. So every effort we can make together to increase the chance of people getting off the roads, we should do that. We should figure that out.
I have two quick questions. When do you expect this agreement with the, let's call them the interested parties, the residents, to be completed?
Well, we started our work the first week. Where's Ronnie? We started our first week of January, I believe, and we've been pretty consistent about when we get together, either literally or by phone. This is high priority for us. It's certainly, as evidenced today, it's certainly high priority for the property owners. We have no reason to believe that we can't come together on our points of view within an extremely short period of time. But as was blurted out, Kika is a player. We have an agreement with Kika that we have to honor. So we need to bring them up to speed. I think we've already had an initial contact I wasn't there, I think Townsend was there, but we need to have the same working relationship with KICA, because there are KICA trails in here that, if there's a representative of KICA in here, I'm coming out, all right? I'm coming out of the closet. They need to perform at a higher level than what it has been performed here to maintain the trails.
Yeah.
So now's a good time, and now's a good time for all of us to figure this out. It's grinding work. It should be the timing part. It should be the highest priority. We don't want to interrupt the season with any foolish improvements. We want to be respectful of the season. But for example, that trail connection to the west of the pool, I don't see any reason why we can't start that pretty promptly. You know, like start a phased project where by the end of this calendar year, let's say by the end of this calendar year, we have a full-scale neighborhood that is ready for improved traffic, well in advance of any development in that area, by the way.
All right, I know it's more specific in your proposal, but as far as the recommendations of the traffic study, are there any that you will not implement except for the sidewalk, which you're substituting the trails for?
Ray needs to address any specific point. For example, if you remember the conversation about the existing road meeting a new road, you know, the transition there, how to best pull that off, because the old road was the then new standard. The new road is the now new standard for environmental sensitivity. So how we feather those two together and respect that, you know, Ray ought to address that. But Ray, I don't know of anything in the proposal, with the exception of the fine tuning of trails. How do you accommodate trails in very specific conditions?
The only thing I would mention, just in regards to carrying forward the street cross-section that Dylan Turner had mentioned, it's a little more complicated than just widening. That's an existing road that meets the town standards of 20 feet. He pointed out in his report accurately that Duneside, the paved section, is 22 feet. While that seems like a small improvement, you have to keep in mind that there are other utilities that have been spaced on the basis of the 20-foot road and other subgrade drains. So that would be something else that we wouldn't see as necessary to widen the paved section from 20 to 22 feet.
But all other proposals, they aligned with our early thoughts in terms of improvements to safety standards. It's more about the finite tuning of, there's some zones where you can't fit an 8-foot section in, but you can fit a 6-foot section trail. Yeah. And so we believe we clearly can meet the intent and goals of the traffic study.
My second and last question actually is for Jordan. Jordan, do you think the partners can commit to funding the project, assuming it's on your property and not your property, but property that's not yet been conveyed?
We've both committed to making our $100,000 investment.
What if it's 500,000?
Well, I think that's another discussion to be had. We've committed up to 100. Kika's committed 100, and if there are additional improvements, say to their pool, then that should be the responsibility.
I'm not talking about pool improvements. I'm talking about the safety improvements.
We think the safety improvements can be encapsulated in that 200,000.
So you do have estimates that you think you can work with.
Building many roads like or many cars like this, yes.
Okay. All right, I asked the question, and this is the last meeting. I asked the question of why the change. You explained
Right.
the change. One of the pieces of correspondence we got is at a meeting recently, they said the partners, so I assume that was you or somebody representing the partners, said the change was because of advertising. Is that a true statement?
No.
Okay. Of course, it's a different statement than we got the last time we asked the question.
Right.
Any other questions of the applicant? Oh, I thought you had.
Yeah, what's going to be the schedule? What's our next action here?
Well, we have to vote on it, approve or disapprove.
Okay. So what we have is, we have obviously some good work being done over the past, 45 days. But we have a plan it's fairly conceptual. We're not sure whether the commitments of funding will cover the key areas of safety improvement. What will we be voting on? Will we be voting on the plan as presented, or are there conditions we can put on it?
We can put conditions on it, but only on the plat itself,
Okay.
not anything off the plat. So the plat is parcel 13, but we can't condition it on things that might happen in the future.
So we
off the plat.
can either approve or deny the plat request. And if we approve, it's, we're trusting that the groups will come together, that it'll be financed, and they'll reach an agreement on what the safety improvements.
Right.
Okay.
And the memo of understanding is
It's
part of the
the plat.
plat at this point?
Should be, since it's.
Well, the language was added as Exhibit B
Right.
on the green colored plat.
Along those lines, can we make it conditional, the approval of the plat conditional on the completion of the work before the cut-through is opened?
I just heard no.
I don't think so,
I don't
Andy.
know, because it's not,
I think we either approve it today or we disapprove it, and we allow them to do more work and come back to us with a more complete application addressing the safety concerns.
even though the blockage right now is on the plat, as opposed to the work outside, you're saying we can't make it
Well,
conditional on that?
the 5-foot non-vehicular access is on 13. It's on
Yeah.
parcel 13, right? But we can't condition it on things happening in the existing section.
Maybe we were talking the wrong opening. I'm talking about the connection from Dune side that is now separated by these poles.
By the valves,
Right here.
right, yeah, that's
So that's on 13,
correct, correct.
and we're talking 13C, which is already there. And that's on the plat.
Correct.
That's the,
That is part of the
Right.
plat. Right.
but all we're saying is it can't be open until the work is completed on the other side.
The work's off the plat.
Right.
All right.
I do welcome all the public being here today. As John said, we've received 50, I think 60 currently emails, more than that for the December meeting. And we had comments by 20 people at the December meeting. And I think it's safe to say the comments from Sparrow Pond people are don't do it. And the comments from Inlet Cove people are open it up, which doesn't bode well for a decision. I think that I would entertain a motion to approve the plat. We can talk about it some more and then vote.
I'd move, yep, one second, then.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded to approve this plat. Any more conversation?
We're given a couple coarse tools here. We're given a binary choice that I don't think any of us are comfortable with.
Correct.
As I said, I think there's been some great work done. There's been engaging the people who are most affected by it. But it's, for us, as I recall, I think I mentioned the other day that one of our responsibilities is to in the code is to protect the residential areas from through traffic and other traffic hazards. You know, without confidence that these safety improvements are going to take place, I don't know that I could feel good about approving it.
But the memo of understanding does, the memo of understanding does commit to up to $200,000 to make such improvements.
Agreed, but we don't know what the cost is, and if the cost is high, or, you know, who's going to step up and pay the coverage.
But I do, well, I just think it's a,
We also don't know, at this point, we don't know what the improvements really are until that agreement is reached. Whether it's 3 weeks, 4 weeks, a week, or it could be 4 months. You know, somebody's gonna have to sit down and start negotiating and get to the bottom line and come up with an answer. I think we can wait until we get that answer.
But to remind ourselves that we are working under a time constraint. You know,
Oh, no, we have to make a decision
to make a
today.
We gotta make a decision.
Either
Yeah.
vote yes or no
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
And,
Mark, how long do you think it would take to do the paths and those things that you were talking about based on your obviously many years of experience?
Well, I think of the paths, which would be a combination of improving existing paths and adding new paths in the context of what I've presented today. You know, again, I rely a little bit on Ray here, but I see, you know, a plus or minus 3 month period to accomplish that. Yeah, the existing trails are where they are. Assessing them is quick and prompt. The interaction with the community association is critical in this. If all of us in this room agree, that's one part of the agreement. So we need to ensure that the community association is aligned too. The newer paths take just a little bit longer, only because we do site surveys, you know, to make certain that the drainage is proper for those. But there is represented here, the only trails that are on parcel 13 that we're committed to contributing to is that one west of the existing pool. All the other trails, and a little bit of the east-west trail along Sparrow Pond, all the other trails are not on our property. And they aren't necessarily on people's property here. I mean, they're on other people's property. You just can't just go in there and start doing stuff.
To make the improvements we're talking about, or that have already been agreed to, would that require KICA to take additional land?
No, not take additional land. They have existing trails, easements on other people's property.
And they're sufficient to cover the width in most cases?
Yes, right. There's some, well, I'm digressing to the refinement part, but there's these oddities, these little fabrics that go through
Cottages.
Sparrow Pond that are important parts of their community. So we want to be respectful of how to enhance those without adversely affecting individual property owners' home sites.
To Britt's comment is that you've got an MOU already. It's already included in the
Yes.
application. I think all we're asking for is an assurance that what we've heard and what's been recommended from a safety standpoint is agreed upon and funded. So what we're talking about is just making sure the MOU is sufficient enough to cover the safety recommendations that have been brought forward.
I think that's right, because it is a good opportunity to fix an existing situation where you've got pedestrians and bikes in the street.
Okay, we have excuse me, ma'am, no, I'm sorry, ma'am. We have a KI Community Association representative here. Did you want to?
I'm Mike Feldman, I'm the treasurer of KICA. I was elected treasurer, I wasn't elected king, emperor, or czar. But I will say, we have seen this plan. We don't know anything about taking or right of ways, what we can do or not do, that's not been studied, and we don't know the final cost.
And I think that's what we're asking for, Mark. Just if you can amend the MOU and give us the assurance that that we have a plan that can be executed and is funded, I think we'd be happy with it.
We've heard that. All I'm trying to remind everyone in this room about is the plat that has been prepared meets all of the standards published by the town. We've further entered into an agreement that goes beyond that of a memorandum of understanding in an attempt, because we were encouraged to do that, an attempt to further clarify that. We thought that had met the criteria at the time when we came back in December. Additional thought by property owners in this room, we once again deferred and postponed a meeting, not 1 month, but 2 months, to accommodate a traffic study that outlines the very things that we're working on. You know, we don't know how to plan parcel 13 now until we know what the access is. So I'm just encouraging us all in this room to, we've met additional criteria, and time allotted to focusing on this. We're prepared to commit to the very things that we're talking about, but I can't represent how much it costs, whether we can get on someone's property. And as is represented by the community association, they're part of the funding source for this. They need to have some assurance that they're funding it in an appropriate way too.
Mark, and I'm not going to challenge your interpretation of the law, but the law requires us to assure the adequate provision of safe and convenient traffic access and circulation, both vehicular and pedestrian, in and out through new land developments. And that's in a direct declaration of purpose of subdivision regulations. So in order to approve this, we've got to be assured that that condition is satisfied.
I think that's where we're at, Mark. I'm not speaking for the entire commission, I'm speaking for myself. But it all looks good, but it's not there yet. And I think we as a commission need to, thanks folks, need to take into account the safety issues that maybe exist today, but are going to be worsened by this opening. And we need to have some comfort that what can be done will be done.
May I ask you?
Sure.
Just one question.
Yeah.
During your meetings with residents of the area, has a KICA representative also been present?
No, I didn't represent that. I didn't represent that, no.
Were
No,
they
but
invited?
Townsend has initiated a first discussion with the board, I believe. But no, these meetings were people most immediate to the area. If I suggested that, I didn't mean to. That was an error on my part.
No, you didn't.
I'll just stop.
But that would suggest the KICA folks, whether it be the board or the members, if they agree to fund something, may in fact have to get an assessment imposed on the rest of the island?
I can't speak for the community association.
And you can't speak for KICA either.
No, all I'm speaking for is the Kiowa partners and what their contribution and commitment is. And I understand that there is a lack of confidence in aspects of our commitment. That's disappointing, to be honest, because we haven't shown evidence of failure on that part in our history, but I get it. And all we're trying to seek to, I'm going to repeat myself, but what would be helpful for me is what exactly does the Planning Commission need to assure that we have met the criteria that addresses your concern? Exactly. Because we've been trying to do the exacting thing all along the path, and we're trying to find where that moment is.
I think a funded plan.
Yeah,
beyond what we've already committed.
Well,
A commitment to fund the plan, yeah.
And it's accepted by the Sparrow Pond Cottage Owners Association, that they've bought into it, that they're good with it, that they say, yes, let's do this, let's move forward.
I'm president of Sparrow Pond Community since the roads on the MOU get turned over to Kika. And it was a hem and a haw, and, you know, I don't have a real good warm fuzzy that that end of this covered yet. By turning down this proposal, it puts urgency to the meetings so that everybody can get back on board, to get everybody collectively to support the safety improvements that would take place.
Right.
Phil, that's right.
The Kika treasurer.
Thank you. Yeah, just to be fair to Jimmy Bailey and the rest of the board, we've seen nothing more than what you've seen today.
We understand that.
And we've only seen it in the last few days. We're absolutely committed to studying it, giving it every fair treatment, but I can't write you a blank check and it's the funding. I can't print money either, I'm not the federal government.
Thank you.
But an MOU was signed by Kika. And that MOU insinuates that there's gonna be matching money if they're offering up $100,000. It's just still, it's an unknown at this point to get that hard commitment.
Right, I think we agree with you on that.
Fred, let me just give an idea of how I think it might proceed or could proceed. The key, I think, here, and I have no objection to this group being the interested or affected parties participating in negotiations with the developer over what would satisfy the needs. They're the ones who are gonna have to live with it, they're the ones who are gonna have to accept it. Once that's done, and that has to be the first step, then Kika and the developer has to get together on a funding commitment and come to a meeting and say, okay, here's what's been agreed to by the property owners, here's what the funding is gonna be, and we'll, between the two of us, we'll figure it out. But we need that assurance, I think, before we can go forward. At least I believe it.
I would just like to add, I think we're using a standard that's going to be impossible to achieve if we insist that all the parties agree. I think that we work under you know, the laws of the state. There are property rights, and we work under the covenants, the development agreements that have been negotiated with the town. So I think what I'm going to use my standard is what is the measure I'm going to use is not a safer environment, but a safe environment. If we come up with a plan that is funded and provides a safe environment, then I'd be willing to support that.
I would too.
I would too.
I would too. Any other comments by commissioners at this time? So what we have on the table is a motion to approve this preliminary subdivision plat. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
That's been denied. Next item on the agenda is correspondent and staff comments. Any of the above?
Just briefly, just reminded those who are signed up for Friday's February 8th continuing ed credit, that's still ongoing, so that's the only thing from staff.
Yeah, I may be about 5 minutes late, John.
Okay.
Thanks, John. Council Liaison, Mr. Prickett, thank you for attending. Item 8 says public comments. Public comments. I would ask that we say brief.
Marilyn Larrick, 1082 Terrapin Court, Sparrow Pond. Thank you. That's brief.
That's pretty brief. Any other comments from the public? Ma'am?
Sorry, it's my poor understanding of this. 1065 Delano Court. Is the pathway that you're talking about 6 foot? It doesn't sound like it's continuous from the end all the way to
I think, ma'am,
Beachwalker.
I think you're going to need to talk to the people that are
Okay.
proposing it. We have no
Yeah.
idea what that is.
The pathway?
Ma'am,
But,
ma'am.
The
not in this
6
forum.
foot?
Not in
Later.
this.
Oh,
Later, thank you.
well, how do I find the answer to these questions?
Talk to your president of your association.
Oh, okay. I talked to my attorney this morning, and he wants to know why this study was done December 16th on a study.
got nothing to do with it.
It's nothing worth it. Get
Thank
another
you.
turn.
Wendy Kulik, 38 Marsh Edge Lane. First of all, I want to again thank this Planning Commission. Time after time, when there are critical issues that are brought before you, you have been extremely thoughtful. You recognize what you can and you can't do, but you raise important questions. And so I thank you all for continuing to do that. Because my biggest concern has to do with something no traffic study could take into account, and that is the number of pedestrians who are there, especially at peak times, the number of people on bicycles, the number of wagons, and the number of families who, as we all know, are used to walking in the middle of the road there and are going to continue to walk in the middle of the road there. So I just want to thank you for your thoughtfulness, your time, and the issues that you've raised. Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy.
Diane Leader, 306 Palm Warbler. I echo the comments so far. Thank you for your vote today. The issue of safety is elusive. And Larry, you said you would vote for a safe plan, recognizing a safer plan probably wasn't possible. I don't know what a safe plan is. I do know that you have the authority to make your decision based on safety. And I also know that the partners are entitled to challenge any decision that you choose to make and to sue the town if they don't like the decision. At the last hearing in December, when asked why the plan was so important to the partners, and I may be remembering this slightly differently, but I paraphrase that Mark responded that it was economic and that the properties are more valuable if they're behind the gate. I say we need to do the right thing for property owners and continue to vote this plan down based on its impact on public safety. Let the partners sue if they like. The town of Kiowa had $2 million to buy the property that we're standing on now, and they had another $10 million to build this municipal building without the need for financing. I believe we have enough to fund any litigation that might ensue. Only by voting no will we ever know if we could have prevailed strictly on the issue of safety, and I urge you to stick with your guns. Thank you.
John D. Hennons, 1222 Greens Lake Cottages. I guess I'm somewhat skeptical about some of the things that were presented. I think the traffic study far understates if I understood the multiplier to be basically double, if anybody believes that the traffic between December and the middle of summer is only double, is dreaming. Okay, so I think it's going to be far more than that. And I don't know, because I couldn't follow everything, whether the traffic study included all the impact of all of the West Beach infrastructure that's going on, hotel and so forth. That's all additive. Getting out of West Beach is going to be horrendous. In and out of West Beach would be horrendous. I was also disappointed, frankly, in the meeting and how much time we spent talking about the height of speed bumps. I'm sorry, but that's not most of these people's concerns. I think the plan for the safety and the paths I fairly well understand. If that road opens, that's a good plan, but it should be a specific plan, and it should be with specific funding, okay, which I think you're basically were saying, okay? But I'm still concerned with the idea that this meeting seemed like it was foregone that the road is opening, and all we're talking about is beyond that. You know, call me old school, but I don't see that as foregone. And also call me skeptical, but the fact that they didn't understand, or that they didn't, when Timbers was going into that, they didn't understand that there was traffic backups on Beachwalker. And if they didn't understand that there was going to be future development in West Beach when they had all that vacant land, believe me, I'm having trouble believing that. Those folks are way too smart for that. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Virginia Abbott, 4304C Forest Drive. You know, having listened to, I've been to all of these meetings, what strikes me is that what we really don't have is an overall plan for that whole area. And to make this one decision without knowing what they're gonna plan to build in that other segment that also will exit onto Beachwalker, as I understand it, from what they've said, and it's gonna be it's not gonna be single-family homes, I don't think. It seems to me that you should be asking them to come up with a much bigger look at what they really plan to do in all that area there before you make a decision to make this one opening that is gonna be so destructive.
Good afternoon. My name's John McKibben. I live at 1069 Sparrow Pond. I've owned the cottage since 1981. I was dead against joining Duneside with the Timbers. Timbers has been described as fractional ownership. That's a nice word. Some people say it's a timeshare. It is a intense resort development. It's not a residential development. It's a resort development that offers, when you look at their brochure, offers hotel plus services. There are going to be, at this time of year, the slowest time of the year, if you go to the sand parking lot in the construction area, you will see between 15 and 20 vehicles. Those are workers. And it's in January. How many people, there's daily housekeeping, for example. There's a concierge service. There's a whole bunch of bicycles. There's a pool, there's a restaurant, there's a clubhouse. There's going to be, in addition to the 9 owners for each unit, there are going to be, I suggest, dozens and dozens of workers daily, and all the support services, food, beverage, housekeeping, laundry. So the traffic study, I could complain with, and I could explain why in some detail, but I don't think that's the point. I agree, it has vastly understated the situation by many factors. What Prem presented today, and I saw for the first time, is interesting. I think it makes some sense. Nobody in this room has seen it until today. And I'm reflecting, and I'm going to be a little bit skeptical. I think what I'm hearing on this board and in this room is they don't trust the partners. They don't trust their commitments. The partners committed to a plan.
Sir, we didn't say that, and I think
I'm
you're going a
sorry.
little too far off the track. So if you want to close it up and.
Thank you. I
Thank you.
think among the people in the room, they're nervous. These discussions that you've had so far, these slides are very interesting, and I can even see possibilities there. I could even be for that. I think what people in this room are worried about is you get the plat approved and something changes. Like it's changed for the entrance, the access via Duneside or not. It's changed 2, 3, 4 times. Assurances were made. Situations changed, as you explained. You had to change your mind. People are worried. You get your approval.
Sir, that's enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next is commissioner comments. Britt?
Excuse me. Well, I think as Larry said, there's been good progress made since our last meeting. The traffic study, I hope we're giving you direction on how this might go from here, and certainly appreciate the comments from the neighborhood.
Gail?
I want to thank you, Mark. Your comments and your additional description has been helpful, at least to me, and I appreciate your efforts to make it more understandable. I appreciate also, obviously, the comments from the neighborhood, and I'm hoping that we can come to some kind of agreement that that we will take care of the safety of your neighborhood and the traffic problems in our efforts to work with KICA and the partners. Not our efforts, but your efforts to make this a more accessible neighborhood for everyone to egress and to get into and to get out of. But I do think we have to have some kind of economic we have to have some kind of economic agreement on what the whole thing is going to cost. I have no idea where the 100,000 came from. I assumed it was based on some kind of study of what this was, what the whole thing was going to cost, but obviously it wasn't. So I think you have to go back to the drawing board. Thanks.
Bill?
No comment.
Larry?
Yeah, I think that number one is that I'm committed to honoring, to following the town code, to honoring the development agreements, and to making sure that property rights are protected. I think the neighborhood has been very fortunate for 30 plus years to have a pedestrian walking mall as part of their community. But that was never, that's a road. I mean, you guys are very fortunate, but it's a road. So but the problem is you had to use it as a mall because you didn't have infrastructure. We want to make sure that within the context of protecting everybody's rights, that we provide the infrastructure to make a safe environment.
Thanks, Larry. Andy?
I basically not only second that, but I would point out and I alluded to this earlier, the road and the transportation getting to and from the Sandcastle is not a whole lot different than the transportation or the road system coming down this way, in terms of the curves, in terms of the lack of paths and sidewalks, etc. And I don't recall, although there's substantially more traffic down there now, I don't recall a whole lot of concern from a safety standpoint, even today. But nevertheless, that's not something we can assume in making a decision here, and I agree with Larry's comments. Fred alluded to this in his comment, and I got a letter directed to me personally, whether or not the other members of the commission did, but I just wanted to note we did receive a letter from the Inlet Cove HOA board, which basically suggested we approve the plan because they saw it to be a traffic reliever for Beachwalker Park. I'm sorry, for Beachwalker. That's all I have.
Thanks, Andy. I have no comments. I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
You stand adjourned.
You made it, Larry. You made it.